Artists are often compelled to create artworks which cause shock or cause a viewer a moment's contemplation. I'd like to think my work leaves a lasting legacy for future generations. I have now earned the title Memorial Artist, and this is largely due to my work recently where I have been immortalising our fallen. Back in 2015, I became the only artist in the world to draw an entire conflict. That involved me drawing all 456 fallen British service personnel killed in the Afghanistan conflict. I drew for 20 hours a day, every day for 12 weeks. And I had to not only promote the work, create the work, but also compile the book. And I'm also doing this around my full-time job, my second job, and my businesses. Since then, I've gone on to create books of the Iraq conflict, the Northern Ireland conflict, and also illustrated a World War II veteran story. I self-publish, so I also have to sell my own work in order to raise the publishing costs. Responding to our time and current events is part of what makes artists and their work current. But I also believe imparting personal touches and also allowing others to impart their own personal experiences and connection makes the work even more powerful. In August 2019, PC Andrew Harper was murdered whilst attending a burglary. The incident was shocking and it was just over an hour from here. A local police officer and parent at our school, PC Stuart Roberts, went to the scene on his motorbike, and he laid his epaulette with a ribbon and a note to Andrew's widow amongst the thousands of floral tributes. This incredibly personal act captured the hearts and imaginations of other officers and services across the world. The epaulette is unique to each individual and is traditionally worn on the shoulder of the uniform of our protective services. Our protective services include police, fire, ambulance, paramedics, RNLI, Coast Guard, Border Force, Customs and Immigration, Highways Agencies, Air Ambulance, Army, RAF, Navy, and so on. There's lots more. Often now, the epaulette has moved to the front of the uniform and we call it a rank slide. But whether it's an epaulette or a rank slide, the bearer always wears the colour, the rank, the badge, and sometimes, in some cases, their service details. This means that this is completely individual to the person wearing it, and it often stays with them throughout their service history. PC Roberts was inspired by the positive comments on social media, and he decided that he would create a collection of epaulettes, and this quickly went viral. Armed with sacks full of epaulettes from all our protective services, he literally didn't know what to do with them. In February, during Parents' Evening, he was visiting my colleagues, and he remembered me fondly as I was his son's tutor for several years. A conversation took place where I mentioned my change of name, and he queried this on the night, and I explained about the books of my fallen and how it was one of those serendipitous moments, memorial collection, memorial artist, we came together. We arranged to meet at school the following evening, and in the interim, he'd joined me to a private group where he'd shared different images of the collection. I scoured the posts looking at colours, and I'd designed a mural by the time I'd seen him the next day, and this involved our protective services engaged in their daily roles. Initially, we set the gallery up for a press interview of the collection, so they would see the epaulettes laid out across the floor. It was a sea of navy and black and a few pockets of colour. After the press, I could then work on the mural itself. For the press interview, I'd actually started on the mural so they had an indication of what was to come, but no one could imagine what I would go on to create. The overall mural is 55 foot long and over 10 feet high. The donations themselves numbered over 22,000 and it came from over 40 countries worldwide. This is a charity piece, and so often in charity, you don't get funding. I didn't get any funding for this, so the materials came from my own budget. And this means that the artist's life isn't quite as glamorous as everybody always thinks. I went on, and initially I wasn't going to put any faces or particular gender onto any of the people. I wasn't going to do any realistic portraits. But this changed. I then decided to start adding in personal touches, things that I knew from my experiences of the fallen. I then decided, following that I would actually look inside the boxes and create things. So for example, the Royal Marines had donated some of their mess cloths, and I went on to create a landing craft which was depicted with Mark Birch. He was killed in Afghanistan, and so it seemed fitting to depict him on the piece. He was a local lad as well, and I created several pieces for his family since I'd met them in 2015. Liam Tasker and his working dog Theo became the focal point of the military scene. Again, both were lost in Afghanistan, and this was later followed by a chance discovery of a medic's armband. This went on to create medic Corporal Channing Day. She was killed in Afghanistan, and I'd created a picture for her mother, Rosemary, and I decided that I would keep the same characteristic bun and the pose that I'd used for the painting. This way her mother, Rosemary, would know that Channing is also in the mural. I then went on to create the horses from the Hyde Park bombing, and then I also went on to create police dog Bryn with his handler Ian. Incidentally, Ian is the only person depicted realistically on the mural who is still alive. They were both involved in an incident in Irthlingborough, which sadly took the life of Bryn, and Ian was injured in the same incident. At this point, I met Andrew Harper's mother and stepfather. They private messaged and asked if they could come and have a look at the mural. I think hearing my history that I put into it and seeing the hundreds of cards and letters that had accompanied each of the epaulets in the mural was incredibly humbling for them, and also I think it gave an elevated state to the actual mural itself. They realised how much this piece meant to so many others as well as themselves. Often when we lose somebody, we hold on to every infinite detail, and so the fact that this mural contains so many people's personal effects, people who we've lost in the line of conflict, whether it be through the protective services during their daily roles or maybe some of their experiences with PTSD afterwards, has given this mural an even heightened state of importance. Quite often when we lose someone, they quickly fade into a memory and they become purely a number. Each of my books denotes the numbers lost on the official military lists, but it feels like sometimes they are just literally reduced to the annals of time. I'd like to think that my work makes these people back into our memories and therefore keeps us leaving them with a lasting legacy. They are more than a number, they are somebody's someone. We had an unofficial unveiling as I needed to make bespoke frames for the mural. That involved inviting people to come along and have a look at the actual pictures that I'd created. At this point, I should say that COVID-19 struck. I just started creating a travelling mural. I had the foresight to take it home, and it's something that I finished during lockdown. And it's something more manageable. It's 1 metre high and 12 metres long. At this point, we'd had over 40 countries, 22,000 donations. We'd had donations from people from 9/11, from the Australian bushfires, along with, obviously, people who we've lost in the line of service. I mentioned earlier that artists respond to events of the time. I wanted to use some of the epaulets to create a piece that related directly to the NHS following the COVID crisis. I had limited colour, but Captain Tom had become the symbol I'd been looking for. He epitomises that can-do attitude of his generation. He had that cheeky little smile and the twinkle in his eye, along with the rainbow that's become synonymous of COVID. This was the perfect response to this particular piece. VE Day loomed after, and I chose to create Tom in his youth next to a grenadier, which was Lance Sergeant Eric Pressland. I was fortunate enough to have illustrated his memoirs in a book. He was also from the same period, and so I called it our heroic generation. I love to think that those two serve the heroic grit that we have of that time and go on to sort of inform our generation of the sacrifices that they made. The murals themselves are always something that I would like to leave some kind of lasting legacy into. So with Eric's story, I managed to hand paint some of his memories into the background of that mural, making it again an even more powerful piece. The murals are now hopefully going to go to a National Emergency Services Museum in Sheffield. Due to COVID, they sadly had to close, and we are not sure yet whether they'll raise the funds to be able to reopen. Like many charities, they rely solely on donations. For me, I feel incredibly blessed to have been part of something so unique and have had the opportunity to create these lasting legacies for our future. These murals hopefully will remain in the public museums for future generations to love and cherish for many years to come. Thank you for listening.